The rain was pouring when Jack Carter, a war veteran with nothing left but his loyal dog, burst through the hospital doors carrying a little disabled girl in his arms. Her skin was pale, her breath fading, and yet the answer he got was cold. No insurance, no admission. In that moment, the world seemed to turn its back on them. But what happened next would prove that kindness can still rise even from the darkest corners. A stranger's decision that night would change 3 lives forever. Before we dive into this unforgettable story, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Share it in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss stories that touch the heart and restore faith and kindness. Wishing you a peaceful and meaningful day. The winter rain had begun before sunset, rolling in from the sea and swallowing the small town of Ravenshade in a curtain of gray. The streets were nearly empty, lamps flickering through mist as water whispered along the gutters. Jack Carter, a man in his early 40s, tall, lean, and marked by the silence of a soldier who had seen too much, walked beside his loyal German shepherd, Rex, a 6-year-old with a sable coat glistening under the rain. Together, they moved along the muddy roadside toward the pine woods where Jack's small wooden cabin waited. He had spent the day doing odd jobs at the docks for a few dollars, just enough for the next meal. The downpour deepened, silver threads slanting under the streetlights, and though Jack had weathered far worse in war, something in this cold felt lonelier than any battlefield, as if the whole town had stopped breathing. Then, suddenly, Rex stopped. His ears pricked sharply, his whole body stiffened. A low growl rippled through his chest. Jack halted, looking down at him. "What is it, boy?" he asked quietly. Rex barked once, urgent, then bounded toward a patch of grass near the roadside ditch. Jack followed, his boots splashing through the water. The beam of a distant light cut across the rain, and there, beneath a half-fallen road sign, he saw a small shape curled in on itself. At first, he thought it was a bundle of rags left in the storm. But when he knelt, his breath caught. It was a little girl, no older than 5 or 6, trembling violently, her hair plastered to her forehead. One leg ended in a small metallic prosthesis, its joint rusted and cold, glinting faintly in the streetlight. Her face was pale, lips tinged blue, eyes half closed as if she were drifting between consciousness and sleep. Rex whined softly and pressed his nose against her arm. Jack pulled off his coat and wrapped it around the child. "Hey there, sweetheart," he murmured, his voice hoarse. "You're gonna be okay. You hear me?" The girl's eyelids fluttered, and she whispered something barely audible through chattering teeth. "Uncle." She said she'd come back, but she didn't. The words hit him harder than the rain ever could. He swallowed, trying to speak, but no sound came. He tightened the coat around her fragile body and lifted her into his arms, feeling how light she was, too light. He looked down the dark road ahead, rain streaming down his face. There was no car, no light, only the faint orange glow of the town far off. "Come on, Rex," he said quietly. "We're not leaving her here." The dog gave a short bark and trotted beside him as Jack began walking, the girl cradled tightly against his chest. Each step splashed cold water against his legs, but he didn't slow. The night wind bit through his shirt, the rain stung his skin, yet all he could think of was keeping that small heartbeat alive. It took him nearly half an hour to reach the old clinic on the edge of town. By then, his arms ached and his breath came in ragged bursts. The clinic was a squat 2-story building with a faded sign that read, "Ravenshade Community Health." A single light glowed behind the frosted glass door. Jack kicked it gently, shouting, "Hello? Please, someone, help me! There's a child, she's sick!" The door opened a crack, revealing a woman in her 50s, her hair pulled tight, a stethoscope hanging around her neck. Her expression was one of irritation, not alarm. "What's the matter?" she asked sharply. Jack shifted the child so the woman could see her face. "She's burning up. Please, she needs a doctor." The woman frowned. "Do you have any documentation, identification, insurance?" Jack shook his head, rain dripping from his chin. "No, I just found her. She's alone out there." The woman sighed, the kind of sigh that carries years of indifference. "I'm sorry. We can't take her without proper paperwork. Try the county hospital downtown." And with that, she closed the door. Jack stood motionless for a long second, the sound of the latch clicking echoing louder than the storm. He looked down at the girl in his arms. Her lips trembled, but no sound came out. "You hear that?" he whispered bitterly. "We're not even worth opening the door for." He lowered himself onto the cold concrete step beneath the clinic's awning. Rex pressed against his leg, whining, his fur plastered flat by the rain. Jack rocked the girl gently, trying to keep her warm. People passed by on the sidewalk, umbrellas overhead, eyes turned away. Not one of them stopped. Minutes crawled by. Jack's fingers were numb, his pulse hammering. He looked toward the street again. There was another hospital across town, larger, maybe kinder, but it was miles away, and he had no car. He closed his eyes for a moment, then tightened his hold around the child. "All right," he whispered, standing slowly. "We keep going." Rex rose too, shaking the rain from his coat. Together they stepped back into the downpour, heading toward the faint glow of the next streetlight. The road was slick and nearly deserted. Jack's legs trembled with fatigue, but he pushed forward. Emily, the name had slipped from her lips once while she slept, rested limply against his chest, her breath shallow. Rex walked close, body tense as if shielding them both. When the wind picked up, Jack turned his back to it, sheltering her from the gusts. "Hang in there, kid," he murmured. "We'll find someone who still remembers what mercy means." Then, from behind the curtain of rain, headlights cut through the darkness. A black sedan slowed as it approached, its engine humming softly. The driver, a man in his late 50s with silver hair and deep-lined features, leaned forward. His name was William Heron, a reclusive millionaire who had made his fortune in shipping but lost his only daughter years ago to a hospital's closed doors. He saw Jack, standing there, soaked, exhausted, holding a limp child, and something inside him broke open. The car rolled to a stop. William stepped out, the rain catching on his tailored coat. "What happened?" he asked, voice firm but gentle. Jack looked up, uncertain whether to trust him. "She's sick. They wouldn't take her." William's gaze moved to the little girl's pale face, to the trembling hand that clutched the edge of Jack's coat. He drew in a slow breath, memories flashing behind his eyes. Another night, another child he couldn't save. "Get in," he said quietly. "Now." Jack hesitated only a second before nodding. He climbed into the back seat, still holding Emily, while Rex leapt in beside them without a sound. The interior was warm, the air filled with the faint scent of leather and cedar. William slid behind the wheel, glanced once in the mirror, then pressed the accelerator. The car surged forward into the storm. Through the window, Jack watched the rain streak past in silver lines, and for the first time that night, he let himself believe there might still be hope at the end of the road. The car sped through the storm, its headlights slicing across rivers of rain that shimmered over the highway. Inside, silence ruled. The rhythmic hum of the engine and the steady drumming of water on the windshield were the only sounds. Jack Carter sat in the back seat, cradling Emily Hensley against his chest, her frail body wrapped in his damp jacket. Her breathing came in shallow gasps, every exhale a quiet plea for mercy. Beside him, Rex lay still but alert, his golden brown eyes never leaving the girl's face. William Heron gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles pale against the leather, the glow of the dashboard reflecting off his sharp, tired features. He had once made this drive before, years ago, on another night filled with rain and fear. That night, he had carried his own daughter in his arms. He could still remember the red "emergency closed" sign that flashed outside the hospital doors, the way the nurse's voice trembled as she said there was nothing they could do. His daughter's small hand had gone cold before sunrise. Since then, William had avoided hospitals, avoided the sound of rain, and avoided any memory that reminded him of the night the world had taught him how cruel its rules could be. But seeing Jack now, soaked and trembling, holding a child that the world had already turned its back on, something deep within him shifted. The rain showed no sign of stopping. Through the blurred windshield, the outline of the St. Helena Medical Center appeared ahead, its bright white sign glowing through the mist like a promise. It was the largest hospital in the region, a place known for its state-of-the-art facilities and for its equally rigid bureaucracy. William pulled into the emergency entrance, his car tires hissing over wet pavement. The automatic doors slid open, spilling light onto the soaked figures as Jack stepped out, still clutching Emily. "Please," he rasped to the startled attendant at the counter. "She's dying." Behind the counter stood Nurse Clara Fields, a woman in her mid-30s with warm brown eyes and an aura of calm that belied the chaos around her. Her light brown hair was pinned back neatly, her uniform crisp but creased at the sleeves, evidence of a long night already in motion. Clara had spent a decade in hospitals like this, places where compassion often collided with regulations. She could tell in an instant when someone walked in carrying desperation rather than deception. And what she saw now, the soaked veteran, the child limp in his arms and the loyal dog hovering behind, spoke louder than any paperwork could. "This way," she said quickly, motioning to a nearby stretcher. But before Jack could lay Emily down, a sharp voice cut through the noise. Dr. Henry Caldwell, the on-duty supervisor, stepped forward. He was in his late 40s, his face thin and angular, his expression carved from stone. "What's going on here?" Clara straightened. "Critical. Pediatric emergency. No pulse stability. Severe hypothermia. We need to get her inside now." Caldwell's gaze swept from the girl to Jack. "Who's her guardian?" I just found her," Jack stammered. "She was alone." Caldwell exhaled sharply. "Then we can't admit her without consent. No ID, no records, no treatment authorization. That's the policy." Clara's jaw tightened. "Sir, she's not breathing properly." Caldwell folded his arms. "Then call child services. They'll take care of it when they arrive." He turned as if the matter were settled, but Clara stepped forward. "By the time they arrive, she'll be dead." The words stopped him mid-stride. The nurse rarely raised her voice, but there was something raw and defiant in her tone that made the other staff glance up from their stations. Jack looked between them, soaked and shaking. "Please," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Just help her. Don't let her die because of a form." William had remained silent until now, his tall frame partially shadowed by the doorway. But at that plea, he stepped forward. His voice was low, but carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "I'll take full responsibility. Admit the child under my name." Caldwell turned to him, frowning. "Sir, we can't—" "You can," William interrupted calmly, his eyes unwavering. "And you will. I'll sign whatever you need." The air in the room shifted. Caldwell hesitated, caught between protocol and the weight of a man whose name carried quiet influence in the town. Finally, he gave a curt nod. "Fine. But this is on your record, Nurse Fields." Clara didn't flinch. "Understood." Within minutes, they moved Emily onto the stretcher. Her small fingers twitched once as if reaching for something unseen. Jack followed close, his eyes fixed on her face. Rex padded behind, dripping water onto the sterile floor, his ears flat and tail low. In the emergency bay, bright lights reflected off metal instruments, and the rhythmic beeping of monitors filled the air. Clara's hands moved with steady precision, checking pulse, ordering oxygen, warming fluids, her calmness a quiet anchor in the storm of motion. Jack stood nearby, gripping the rail, every muscle in his jaw clenched. William lingered at the edge of the room, watching silently, his thoughts lost somewhere between past and present. For a brief moment, Jack's knees buckled, and he caught himself on the side of the bed. He hadn't eaten since morning, hadn't rested in 2 days. Clara noticed and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You need to sit." "I'm fine," he murmured, though his eyes glistened. Just don't let her go." The nurse met his gaze, understanding more than words could say. "We won't." Behind them, Rex gave a low whine, circling once before lying at the foot of the bed, his muzzle resting on his paws, eyes fixed on the girl he had found in the rain. As oxygen filled Emily's lungs, her chest began to rise and fall in uneven rhythm. The color crept back to her cheeks, faint but visible. William exhaled, realizing he had been holding his breath for minutes. For the first time in years, he felt something that wasn't regret. It was hope, fragile but alive. Clara checked the monitors again and nodded softly. "She's stabilizing." She glanced toward Jack and William. "You did the right thing bringing her here." Jack blinked away, the water dripping from his eyelashes. "I just couldn't walk past her." William said nothing, only reached out to gently pat Rex's head. The dog's tail thumped weakly in response. Outside, thunder rolled over the bay, but inside the hospital, the world felt still. Jack sat on the edge of the waiting bench, his soaked boots leaving a trail of water on the tile. William stood beside him, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the glass window of the treatment room. Clara moved quietly inside, adjusting tubes and blankets. To any bystander, it was just another late-night emergency, but to these three strangers bound by chance, it felt like the universe had momentarily paused to let a miracle breathe. When the doctors finally wheeled Emily toward the intensive care unit, Jack followed until he reached the restricted line. His lips trembled as he whispered through the glass, "You'll be okay, little one, I promise." Rex pressed his nose against the door, tail still. William rested a steadying hand on Jack's shoulder. "She's safe now," he said softly. Jack nodded but didn't speak. The hallway lights flickered, reflecting on the wet floor like scattered stars. The scent of antiseptic mingled with rain carried through the open doorway. For the first time that night, the cold no longer felt endless. And as Jack stood there watching the small figure disappear behind the white doors, he whispered one last time, to himself, to the world, or maybe to the God he hadn't spoken to in years, "You'll be all right, kid." The words drifted into the quiet hum of machines, a fragile prayer carried on the fading echo of the storm outside. The night gave way to a pale morning light that crept through the rain-streaked windows of St. Helena Medical Center. The storm had passed, leaving behind a fragile calm that smelled faintly of disinfectant and wet asphalt. Jack Carter hadn't moved from the bench outside the pediatric intensive care ward. His clothes had dried stiff, his eyes hollow from exhaustion, but he remained still, watching through the glass as the little girl he had found in the rain slept under soft white sheets. Rex lay at his feet, head resting between his paws, tail occasionally thumping when a nurse walked by. Every so often, Jack whispered her name, Emily, as if saying it aloud anchored her to the world. Inside the ward, Nurse Clara Fields reviewed the night's reports. The little girl's vitals had stabilized, though her body still showed signs of severe exposure. Clara had spent half the night on the phone trying to trace a guardian or emergency contact, but every call ended in the same way. Silence. The child's name matched nothing in the hospital's active system. Frowning, she decided to dig deeper. In the back office, she accessed the state's archive for juvenile health records. It was a slow, tedious process, but years of bureaucratic work had made her patient. Then, just as the clock hit 7, she found a name, Emily Hensley, last listed under Laura Hensley, single mother, address Willow Lane Service Quarters. The file was 2 years old. The notes were brief but heavy. Mother employed as domestic worker for the Meyerson family. Termination following theft allegation. No follow-up contact. Clara leaned back, rubbing her temple. She remembered hearing about that family, one of the wealthiest estates near the harbor, known for their influence as much as for their secrecy. She printed the file and returned to the hallway, where Jack sat half asleep. "Her name's Emily Hensley," Clara said softly. Jack blinked, his voice gravelly. "Hensley," she nodded. "Her mother was a domestic worker for a family named Meyerson. 2 years ago she was accused of theft and dismissed. No record after that. It seems no one ever checked on what happened next." Jack's hands tightened into fists on his knees. "So they just threw her out and forgot her." Clara looked down, her voice steady but sad. "It happens more often than you think." Later that morning, William Harron returned. He looked composed, though fatigue shadowed his sharp features. He brought a thermos of coffee and 2 sandwiches, one for Clara, one for Jack. "I made some calls," he said quietly. Laura Hensley was seen near the harbor about 6 months ago, renting a small room near the docks. After that, nothing. His tone softened. People disappear easily when they're poor, especially when they've been branded as thieves. Jack accepted the coffee with a nod, his gaze distant. "And the girl?" "She stays here," William replied. "Until we know more. I've arranged for the bills to be covered." Clara glanced at him, half grateful, half surprised. "That's generous of you." William smiled faintly. "Not generosity. Debt." As the day wore on, William found himself sitting beside Jack by the window, the soft hum of machines filling the silence. "You ever lose someone, Jack?" he asked. Jack stared at the rain-slick street below. "Too many," he said after a pause. "Out there you get used to it, but it doesn't get easier." William nodded slowly. "My daughter was 8 when she died. Pneumonia. We drove for hours through the storm to reach a hospital. When we got there, they turned us away because my insurance had lapsed. By the time we found another place, it was too late." His voice faltered, the weight of memory catching up to him. "That night broke something in me. I built a life, made money, but I couldn't build peace. When I saw you standing in the rain last night, I saw myself and the father I failed to be." Jack didn't speak for a while. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was heavy with understanding. Finally, he said quietly, "You didn't fail tonight." William's eyes met his, and in that small exchange lay an unspoken truth, that compassion, when chosen, could rewrite old griefs. Across the hallway, Rex stirred, his ears twitching at the faint hum of footsteps, but settled again as the sound faded away. Jack exhaled deeply, feeling something stir within him that had been long buried, the fragile beginnings of faith, not in institutions but in people. Clara reappeared near noon, holding a thin folder. "I made a few calls," she said. "There's an old social services file attached to Emily's name. It says her mother, Laura, was evicted from her last residence after the accusation. She was last seen at Pier 12, near the dock warehouses." She hesitated before adding, "That area isn't safe. It's where the temporary housing is. Drifters, workers, people trying to disappear." Jack straightened, his brow furrowing. "So that's where she might be." William shook his head. "Or where she was." His tone carried the weight of experience. Clara sighed softly. "If we're to help Emily, we need to find her mother, or at least the truth about what happened to her." By late afternoon, Emily stirred for the first time, a faint sound escaping her lips. Jack rushed to her bedside, his voice gentle. "Hey, you're safe now." The girl's eyes fluttered open, unfocused but calm. Her lips moved weakly. "Mom?" Jack swallowed hard. "We're going to find her, sweetheart, I promise." The monitors beeped softly in rhythm with her breaths. Clara smiled faintly and adjusted the IV. "She's strong," she said. "You must have carried her a long way." Jack nodded, his throat tight. "Didn't feel heavy," he said quietly. "Just right." Evening fell, and the hospital grew quieter. Most visitors had gone, leaving the halls dim under fluorescent lights. William stood by the window overlooking the city, speaking quietly on his phone, while Jack sat beside Emily's bed, reading softly from an old magazine. Clara finished her shift paperwork but lingered, reluctant to leave just yet. She looked at Jack, the weary veteran who had walked through a storm for a stranger's child, and at William, a man haunted by loss yet still capable of mercy. She thought, perhaps, that these moments were the unseen proof of humanity's endurance, how pain could still give birth to compassion. Rex lay near the door, his head lifted, ears flicking at every small sound. The hum of the elevator, the shuffle of nurses, all ordinary. But then came something different, the faint creak of a shoe against linoleum, slow, deliberate. The dog's posture stiffened, his tail stopped moving. He raised his head higher, nostrils flaring. From the hallway's shadows, a figure paused near the far corner, a man in a gray jacket, his hood drawn low. He didn't approach, only lingered, his face hidden from view. Rex gave a low, warning growl that made Jack glance up. "What is it, boy?" he murmured. But when Jack looked toward the hallway, the man was gone. Only the sound of rain returned, steady and unbroken. Jack frowned, his soldier's instincts stirring. He stood, walked to the door, and peered out, but the corridor was empty except for the faint scent of damp air. He closed the door softly and looked down at Rex. "Good eyes," he said, patting the dog's head. But in his gut, something uneasy had taken root. The storm outside had ended, but a quieter one was beginning, one he couldn't yet name. Rex settled again, though his eyes remained fixed on the door. Behind them, Emily slept soundly, her small hand clutching the edge of Jack's sleeve. The night returned to St. Helena wrapped in quiet unease. The rain had long stopped, yet the hospital seemed to breathe in the same rhythm as the storm that had passed. a fragile calm before something darker moved beneath the surface. Jack Carter sat beside Emily's bed, his eyes half closed, one hand resting lightly on Rex's back. The German shepherd dozed, but not deeply. His ears flicked at every distant sound. Down the hallway, Clara Fields reviewed reports at the nurse's desk, while William Heron spoke in low tones to a security officer about the man Rex had sensed earlier. None of them yet knew how close danger had come, or how far it was willing to go. Around midnight, Clara stepped into the small staff lounge to refill her coffee. On the counter lay the security log for the night shift, a routine record of visitors and maintenance. She flipped through absent-mindedly until a name caught her attention. Carl Mason, maintenance subcontractor. Clara frowned. She had never seen that name on the approved vendor list. Her instincts prickled. She turned toward William, who was still seated by the lobby window, his posture tense. "Mr. Heron," she said, holding up the log, "does this name mean anything to you?" He took the sheet, his eyes narrowing as recognition struck. "Carl Mason," he murmured. "He used to manage the Meyerson estate. Laura Hensley worked under him." Clara's expression hardened. "He's here?" "Or was," William said grimly. "That man has a record: abuse, coercion, illegal labor. He was investigated years ago for trafficking minors through domestic service contracts, but the case was buried." The words chilled her. She looked toward the security feed. "If he's anywhere near this hospital, Emily's not safe." William nodded. "Then we find him before he finds her." He moved toward the front desk, his old commanding presence surfacing with every step. "Call the police," he told the guard. "Tell them this hospital may have an intruder." Back upstairs, the corridor lights dimmed automatically at midnight. Jack stirred awake to the faint sound of Rex growling low in his throat. "What is it, boy?" he whispered. The dog rose slowly, his body rigid, gaze fixed on the shadow beyond the glass door at the far end of the hall. A faint metallic click followed, the unmistakable sound of a lock disengaging. Jack was on his feet in an instant, muscles tightening out of old instinct. He glanced at Emily. She was still asleep, her small chest rising and falling steadily. "Stay here," he whispered, though she couldn't hear him. Rex padded silently ahead, hackles raised. The silhouette appeared first, tall, heavy-set, moving with deliberate care. As it stepped into the weak fluorescent light, Jack saw a man in his 50s, gray stubble across a rough face, eyes cold and calculating. He wore a maintenance uniform, but the fit was wrong, the badge fake. In his gloved hand gleamed a short, thin blade. Carl Mason. The man's gaze flicked toward the child's room, and for a moment his lips curved into something between a smirk and a sneer. Jack's voice came out low, steady. "You shouldn't be here." Carl froze, then tilted his head slightly. "That girl," he said, his tone coarse, "should have stayed forgotten. Some things are better buried." Rex barked sharply, the sound exploding through the silence. The man lunged toward the door. Jack grabbed a rolling cart and shoved it into his path, metal clanging against the floor. Carl stumbled, then swung the knife in a wide arc. Jack dodged, feeling the blade graze his sleeve. Rex leapt, teeth flashing, clamping down on Carl's forearm with the force of a vice. The man howled, slamming his fist against the wall, trying to shake the dog off. Blood darkened the sleeve of his stolen uniform. Jack lunged forward, tackling him to the ground. The hallway erupted in chaos, alarms blaring, lights flickering as the emergency sensors triggered. William and Clara arrived seconds later, followed by 2 security guards. They froze at the sight, Rex growling over the pinned man, Jack pressing his knee into Carl's back to keep him still, blood pooling on the linoleum. "He tried to reach her," Jack panted. Clara rushed to Emily's room, ensuring the girl was still asleep, while William stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Call the police," he ordered, "and an ambulance for this one. He's not dying on my watch." Carl spat on the floor, eyes flashing hatred. "You think you're saving her?" he hissed. "You're just digging up what you don't understand." But Jack's grip only tightened. "No," he said quietly. "We're ending what you started." When the police arrived, Carl Mason was handcuffed and taken to the emergency ward under guard. Clara stayed behind to clean the blood from Rex's muzzle and Jack's arm, which bore a shallow cut from the fight. "You need stitches," she said softly. Jack shook his head. "Later. How's she?" Clara glanced toward the ward. "Still asleep." Didn't wake through the whole thing. Maybe it's better that way. William returned from speaking with the officers, holding a small folder he'd taken from Carl's dropped satchel. "You'll want to see this," he said grimly. Inside were printed documents, forged transfer papers for juvenile dependents, stamped with old hospital seals. Clara flipped through them, her heart tightening as she realized what they meant. These are records of children, erased from the system. Her eyes lifted wide. He paid someone to make them disappear. As they examined the documents, Clara found one file partially burned but still legible. It bore a name she now knew too well: Emily Hensley, pending relocation. There was an unsigned note beneath it: "Mother non-compliant. Remove asset." The paper trembled in her hands. He was going to sell her, she whispered, and when her mother refused, he framed her for theft. William's jaw tightened. So Laura Hensley ran, and he silenced everyone who knew. Jack's fists clenched at his sides. "Until last night," he muttered, "when she got a second chance." Clara met his eyes. "Thanks to you." The police confirmed Carl's identity within the hour. He had a history that stretched across counties: labor fraud, child exploitation, bribery. It seemed every dark corner of the system had a place for men like him, until luck ran out. As dawn approached, the hospital's halls slowly returned to order. William filed the evidence with the officers, ensuring it would reach the district attorney. Clara finished her report, exhaustion settling into her bones, but tempered by quiet relief. Jack sat beside Rex near the ward, running a hand over the dog's fur. "You did good, partner," he murmured. Rex licked his palm once, then rested his head on Jack's knee, eyes half closing with fatigue. By morning, the first rays of sunlight filtered through the blinds, pale and hesitant. Emily stirred, blinking under the soft glow. Jack leaned forward instantly, his rough features softening. "Hey, sunshine," he said. "How are you feeling?" The little girl's voice was hoarse, but steady. "Is Rex okay?" Jack smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "He's fine," he said. "He's dreaming that you're safe now." Emily smiled weakly, her eyelids fluttering shut again. "Good," she whispered. "He deserves nice dreams." The room grew still again, filled only with the sound of the monitor's steady rhythm. Outside, the world was waking, gray clouds breaking to reveal the first fragile hint of blue. In that moment, the war seemed over. Jack sat quietly, watching the light fall across the girl's peaceful face. William stood at the window, his silhouette tall against the morning glow, while Clara entered softly with a clipboard in hand. For now, the danger had passed. The truth had found its way into the open, and for one night at least, hope had won. The weeks that followed felt like the slow exhale after a long, held breath. Ravenshade, once a quiet coastal town content to look away from the suffering at its edges, found itself at the center of whispered conversations and newspaper headlines. The story of the child rescued from the storm spread quickly, of a soldier who refused to walk past a dying girl, a nurse who broke the rules for compassion, and a man of wealth who chose mercy over silence. But it was the truth about Carl Mason that ignited the town's conscience. His arrest uncovered years of deceit buried under influence and money, and for the first time in decades, the people of Ravenshade began to see what their indifference had allowed to grow in the shadows. In the courthouse that overlooked the harbor, the trial was swift and unrelenting. Carl Mason sat shackled in the defendant's chair, his once proud posture now slumped beneath the weight of evidence that left little room for doubt. Witnesses came forward, former employees, children from orphaned homes, and even a hospital clerk who confessed to being paid to alter records. Clara Fields testified with calm strength, detailing how the forged files had been found and how Emily's name had nearly vanished from the system forever. Jack sat quietly in the back row with Rex lying at his feet, his hands folded, eyes steady. When the verdict was read, 15 years in state prison, no one in the courtroom cheered. There was only silence, deep and cleansing, like the sea pulling away the debris after a storm. Justice, however, reached further. Dr. Evelyn Sharp, the clinic supervisor who had turned Jack and Emily away that night, was stripped of her medical license. Her name became a warning, a symbol of what happens when policy replaces compassion. Newspapers printed her photograph beside editorials, asking how many other doors had been closed on those who had no paperwork, no status, no voice. The scandal forced the town council to implement new emergency protocols, ensuring that no patient would ever again be refused life-saving care for lack of insurance. Ravenshade, shaken but awake, began to mend its soul. William Harron stood at the heart of that change. In the months that followed the trial, he used his influence and fortune to establish Emily's Hope Fund, a foundation dedicated to providing medical care for abandoned or low-income children across the county. The fund's offices opened in a refurbished wing of St. Helena Medical Center, its doors marked with a bronze plaque bearing a simple inscription, "For every child who was ever turned away." Clara became one of the lead coordinators, her dedication turning late-night compassion into a lifelong mission. William himself attended the first opening ceremony, his gray hair catching the morning light as he spoke softly to the crowd. "Kindness," he said, "is the only medicine that never expires." Jack Carter remained close to the hospital. During those months, spending his days by Emily's side as she recovered. She grew stronger each week, her cheeks filled with color, her laughter returning like sunlight, breaking through fog. Rex rarely left her room, earning the affectionate title, the guardian of Ward 6 from the nurses. The bond between the three deepened beyond words. Jack often found himself smiling quietly at her jokes, something he hadn't done in years. There was a calm in him now, not the silence of solitude, but the peace of purpose. For the first time since leaving the army, he had someone to protect who wasn't just a mission, but a heartbeat that gave his own life meaning. When the guardianship hearing was finally held, the courtroom felt less like a battleground and more like a blessing. The judge, a dignified woman named Miriam Hale, reviewed the case with care. Emily, now healthy and dressed in a light blue dress Claire had bought her, sat beside Jack, her small hand gripping his calloused one. William was present as well, his support quiet but unwavering. "Mr. Carter," the judge said, her voice gentle but formal, "you've demonstrated extraordinary commitment to this child's well-being. Do you wish to assume legal guardianship of Emily Hensley?" Jack nodded once, emotion tightening his throat. "Yes, ma'am," he replied simply. The gavel came down with a single decisive strike. "Then it is so." Emily looked up at him, eyes shining. "Does that mean you're my family now?" Jack's smile trembled. "Yeah, kid. I guess it does." Months later, the old cabin near the woods was empty. Jack sold it quietly, taking only a few worn belongings and the framed photo of Rex as a pup. The three of them, Jack, Emily, and Rex, moved to a small coastal cottage near the Ravenshade lighthouse. The house was modest, painted white with blue shutters, its porch facing the endless stretch of sea. Every morning, sunlight poured through the windows like liquid gold, and the smell of salt carried through the air. Jack took odd jobs repairing boats at the nearby marina, while Emily spent her afternoons drawing by the window or feeding gulls by the shore. Life had slowed into something steady, something human again. Clara and William visited often. On weekends, the four of them would gather by the lighthouse for coffee and laughter, watching Emily and Rex chase each other across the dunes. William's health had begun to fade, but his spirit seemed lighter than it had been in years. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low over the water, he told Jack quietly, "You gave her back to the world, but she gave something back to all of us." Jack didn't answer right away. He only looked toward the girl running through the sand, her prosthetic leg gleaming in the amber light, Rex bounding joyfully beside her. "She's the bravest one of us all," he said finally. As spring came, Emily received her new prosthetic leg, lighter, stronger, designed for movement rather than mere balance. The first morning she tried it, she insisted on walking down to the beach. Jack watched from the porch as she took cautious steps on the wet sand, Rex circling around her like a proud guardian. Then she started to run, slow at first, then faster, her laughter rising above the crash of waves. "Look, Jack," she shouted, "I can run!" His throat tightened as he waved back, sunlight glinting off the water behind her. For a man who had known war and loss, that sound, the laughter of a child running free, was the purest victory he'd ever known. The days melded into one another after that, gentle and full. Every morning brought new routines, feeding Rex, watching the sea, cooking breakfast while Emily sang tunelessly from the next room. Sometimes Jack caught himself standing on the porch at dawn, coffee in hand, gazing at the lighthouse beam fading with the sunrise. He would think of the night they found her, the cold rain, the locked doors, and how easily fate could have chosen silence instead of salvation. Yet here they were, the veteran, the child, and the dog, living proof that one act of courage could ripple into 1,000 unseen kindnesses. On a quiet evening, as the tide rolled in and gulls dipped through the orange sky, Emily sat beside Jack on the sand, Rex curled between them. "Do you ever miss the old days?" she asked softly. Jack smiled faintly. "Sometimes," he said, "but not as much as I'd miss this." She leaned her head on his shoulder, her prosthetic leg half buried in the sand, waves licking its edge. The light from the lighthouse swept over them in a slow, graceful arc. For a moment the world was still. No storms, no fear, only peace. And when the wind carried her laughter out to sea, Jack knew that some stories don't end. They just find the shore they were always meant for. Sometimes the greatest heroes are not those who wear uniforms or stand on stages, but the ones who quietly choose compassion when no one is watching. Jack, William, Clara, and even a loyal dog like Rex remind us that kindness doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers in the rain, lifts a child from the cold, and changes a life forever. Their story teaches us that true humanity is built on empathy, sacrifice, and the courage to care when it's hardest to do so. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us what kindness means to you, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that inspire faith, love, and second chances. May God bless you and your loved ones with peace, compassion, and protection in every step of your journey.